Welcome back, everyone, to another Weather at a Glance video. In today's forecast, we're going to be going over the weather this winter. We're kind of taking a look at the current patterns and how they're going to play into this winter and kind of how they're giving a foreshadowing effect of what we can expect to see for much of the East Coast this winter. All coming up in just a bit. All right, now on our first slide, we're taking a look at our GFS simulated reflectivity from Pivotal Weather. And here you can see we see a lot of systems developing down by Texas and Louisiana. You can see there a giant low pressure system, and it's very wet, very moist, and it's going to move up the coast. Now, right now, we don't have a lot of cold air in place down for much of the southeastern United States and much of the mid Atlantic, and that's pretty normal. But this winter, we are expecting cooler conditions for these areas, and I do believe that it's going to take some time for those cooler conditions and even near freezing conditions to make it down towards Virginia and North Carolina. But once they do, I do believe a lot of the Appalachians and all of those areas, the higher elevations in the mid Atlantic, will expect those snowy conditions this winter. As you saw on the forecast map, we are expecting big snow for much of the Appalachians. You can see here these low pressure systems track up through the north, and once that cold air is in place, once we get below freezing from the mid levels down to the surface, we are expecting those big snowy conditions for much of these areas. And you can see why. We have a lot of precipitation moving up through this area, a lot of rainfall. And what would happen if that rainfall were to turn to snow because of the cold? We'd see a lot of snowfall for these areas, and that's the current storm track. So that's kind of the idea with this winter. You can see that we are expecting a lot of snowy conditions for these areas, but right now it is just still too warm. We're still too early in the winter. We're going to wait till about mid-December or January, and I really think that's when we're going to see this kind of come into play. But for a lot of the Northeast, we are seeing already that snowfall, that big snowfall come into play, and we even see some systems riding down once we have a ridging effect over through the central U.S. We see a lot of these systems develop over Minnesota, and then we can see some come down here through the Northeast. And the Northeast is going to be a big player in this winter. So we're going to see a lot of snowfall accumulate over in the Northeast. We have at times the subtropical jet stream pushing that moisture up along the East Coast, and we have the polar jet stream kind of interacting with that as well. We see it coming down from the north, and we see this is kind of a colliding zone for the polar jet stream and the subtropical jet stream. Both of these areas are going to be bringing systems from right and left, and we're going to see a lot of stuff accumulating over this area, thus creating a lot of precipitation and even snowfall whenever it's colder. Now, looking at the European high resolution forecast model, we are also seeing a similar story here. So you can see over here, a lot of that snowfall is for the Northeast and much of the northern parts of the United States. We aren't really seeing that down south yet because it's still too warm down there. But you can see these systems developing down by Texas, and then we see them shift up, and a lot of that precipitation is moving up through the mid-Atlantic, over the Appalachians, and then up into the Northeast. And we're going to see those nor'easter conditions as well. You can see a lot of these are staying over the East Coast, bringing those nor'easter conditions, but it's still too warm along the East Coast and along throughout much of the Southeast United States and mid-Atlantic for any snowfall to accumulate. We still need those cooler conditions to develop, and that likely will be by mid-December to early January. Now, to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at so far, this is our total accumulated QPF. So that's kind of showing you all the precipitation that is accumulated here. Now, we see most of the precipitation is going to be accumulated over much of the Ohio Valley and even up into the Northeast United States. We don't really see a lot down here for the mid-Atlantic yet, so we are going to see this thing a little bit westward as of what we're seeing right now with the GFS. So we are seeing that precipitation starting up over eastern Texas, and then it's going to ride up over into the Ohio Valley in the Northeast United States. We see a lot of that precipitation accumulating over here. And that's really going to be a big player. Not too many of these western systems actually make it to the east. We do see them dying off by the mountains, by the Sierra Nevada mountains down in California and up in the mountains over here in Washington. We don't really see too much of that riding over, but we do see a lot of these systems developing down in the Gulf of Mexico with that subtropical jet stream. And that's going to enhance a lot of the moisture and bring that up into the Northeast. So a lot of these areas right now over here for much of the Southeast United States, including Florida, we aren't going to see too much precipitation just yet. But we are expecting much of the western portions here as of now. This is for the next 3 weeks or so, according to GFS. We are expecting a lot of that precipitation to stay a little more westward. Now, the European forecast model tells a different story. We actually see a lot of that westward precipitation not being so active, and we do see a lot of the precipitation staying a little more southward. So we do see a lot of the southeast getting a lot of that big precipitation. Even some of these areas were up to 4 to 5 to 6 inches for Georgia. And we do see more of the 1.8 to 2 inches for much of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic and Ohio Valley. So a lot of these areas to the west and northwest are staying a little more dry according to the European forecast model. And this is a slightly shorter run than the GFS. So this doesn't take us out as far as the GFS would, but we are expecting less precipitation over here overall. and more precipitation to the south. Now, you may be wondering, why would this play into our winter? This is such a short range. We aren't really seeing how this is going to play into the long-term effect. Well, what we're doing is we're taking a look at our current weather pattern that's been consistent over the past couple months. Again, this type of pattern has been consistent. This type of storm track has been very consistent. And we are seeing how that's going to play, how our current conditions could play into our winter. So when we talk about winter, we want to know about the snowfall. Right now, here is the current snowfall trajectory for totals with the 10 to 1 inch ratio on the GFS. And right now, this is over the next 3 weeks or so. You can see some of the Appalachians do get up to 12 to 16 inches of snowfall. Those are in those pinks there. The blues are about 4 to 5 inches. So we could see anywhere in the lighter blues, that's 1 to 2 inches. In the darker blues, that's 4 to 5 inches. And we see a lot of these 12 to 16 inch areas up above Pennsylvania and up throughout much of the northern northeastern United States. And we do see some of the coastal areas, especially in Maine, getting some of those 12 to 16 inch totals. That's suggested by our latest 060 GFS run. Now, some of these areas do see 24 to even 32 inches, in some areas even up to 36 plus inches for some of these higher elevations in the Northeast. That's going to be a big area for snowfall throughout the next couple of weeks, and that is suggesting that we likely will see a lot of snowfall in these areas this winter. I had a lot of doubts on my snowfall forecast for this year because a lot of people didn't think the Northeast was going to be really big for snowfall this year. But as we see so far, the GFS is suggesting that this is going to turn true, at least for the next 3 weeks. Now, looking at the European, again, the European doesn't take us out as far as the GFS, but this is looking over the next 2 to 2.5 weeks, and we are expecting kind of a similar story. We see a fair amount of snowfall for the Appalachians, not as much as the GFS has suggested, but we do see a lot of those areas. We do see east of Erie, we do see some of those 12 to 16 inch totals. Up throughout much of the Midwest as well, around the Great Lakes, we do see those higher snowfall totals as well. And then up throughout the Northeast, we do see much of those 12 to 16 inch totals. None of those 36 to 40 inch totals that we saw in the GFS, but we do see these higher accumulations overall. All right, I want to thank you all so much for watching today's video. A big thanks to our channel member, David Hunter. Thank you for supporting the channel. I would ask you to consider subscribing for more ES forecasts free of charge. And I would ask you to consider following the Weather at a Glance official Facebook page for more inside information and complimentary personal forecasts when you message me on my Facebook page. Again, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.